Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Application Packaging Experts Roundtable. Our regular housekeeping here, everyone is muted. We've got a Q&A session. We really do encourage questions at any time. We'll make time at the end, but as things come up, please do fill that up for us. And we will be recording this as always. If you go to the sign up page, you'll see we've got a history of all the different sessions and links to the videos. Speakers today, myself, Bob Kelly. I run product management for Admin Studio and our software vulnerability management products. Kieran?
Hey, Kieran Munke, product manager for Admin Studio. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Mike O'Connor, Senior Solutions Engineer. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone. Allie Hansen, Major Account Manager. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you, Allie. New face at the round table. Gonna help us out with our Q&A. So in this session, we're going to talk. I'm basically going to do a sort of a redelivery of the session I did for the App Manage event. The App Manage event is an annual event that takes place in Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's kind of a unique event in that it is focused on application packaging, management, security type topics, very focused. The sessions for the 2022 sessions are up in a playlist on the YouTube page at the link there. There's some good stuff from different speakers that attended, a lot of topics that I think would be of interest to this audience. And next year's Save the Date is for October 6th. I fully intend to be there. And if there's any long-term planning you can do to get in there, we'd love to see you there. So, like I said, this is kind of a version of my presentation, and I think a lot of the audience knows me by now, so I'm going to do a very quick version of this. But the session title was Notes from the Field, Creative Solutions to Application Management Challenges. The Notes from the Field concept came from this old Microsoft Press series of books that I was an avid reader of back in the day. You can tell by the titles of these books, they were a long time ago, and apparently that series died off. But the idea behind it was discussion around kind of best practices before best practices was such a term, that's used constantly. But, we tried this and it didn't work. We tried that and it didn't work. We changed this in this way and it was better. Kind of just real world experience. And that was the idea behind, and will be the idea behind this topic today. I set it up by explaining why I thought I was in a good position to be able to speak to what people are doing. I've been in the space for a very long time. I've written some books. I've run some websites all focused on this topic. And I've run endpoint management solutions as products. And of course, I run Admin Studio today. So there's a lot of opportunity for me. And it's one of my favorite parts of the job, talking to customers about the challenges they face and different creative ways of dealing with them. That's not always product feature alone. It's often kind of a policy or methodology that the product plays a role in. So that is the kind of the basis for this. I've got a few different topics. The nice part here about this version of the presentation is you don't just get my experiences, but I've also got Mike and Kieran here who have been in the space a very long time and have also talked to hundreds of customers between them. So I'm sure a lot of what we hear is similar, but we can get some additional perspective from our other experts at the roundtable. And I also have to point out again, so I if you do presentations, you often find yourself doing like a Google search, Google image search, and trying to find something that matches your topic well. I use Midjourney, the AI system where you can type in keywords and get an image back and kind of steer it in a certain direction and so forth. It's something I've enjoyed playing with lately, and so I used it to generate all the images that you'll see in this presentation. I really like this one. It's just a hoodie, with code. There's oh, I'm getting an echo. Yeah, anybody who's not speaking, please mute. So it's kind of neat that there's no person there. It's just the hoodie and the code. I really like the way this one came out. Actually, I like them all, and like the live session I did, I will try not to spend too much time talking about them. It's just a backdrop. So this first question we'll discuss is, are you on the latest version? Is it secure? The challenge, of course, being that you have a lot of applications to track and probably a lack of reliable data in terms of what exactly do you have? What is its security status? What is the latest version? It can be a challenge just to keep up with that. If you had, a couple dozen applications, you could probably manage it. But a lot of the customers we talk to have hundreds, even thousands of applications, which makes just knowing what the latest version is a challenge all on its own. So one common solution to this is the concept of a product owner. When I asked for a show of hands, almost everybody raised their hand that they have some concept of a product owner strategy in their organization. The idea here being that that there's one person responsible for one or a small number of applications, and they're supposed to be the ones that keep up with what is the latest version and is it secure. Much easier to handle when that responsibility is spread out. This has worked for some and not others. Actually, I wouldn't say it doesn't work for anybody, but it does work better for some than others. And one of the places I've seen it work really well is when a sense of ownership is fostered. So you don't just assign WinZip to somebody and say, you're the WinZip guy. They really need to feel like they have a responsibility, to the organization, that this application, ideally the application means something to them, right? I mean, applications like WinZip, it's a little hard to get passionate about. So you'll need to assign that one to a certain kind of person, but often there is a subject matter expert or just a key stakeholder for an application. And that person, that has some familiarity and investment in the product itself is going to be your ideal product owner, because they'll be more apt to understand new features and functionality. And if they're important, obviously sign up for newsletters and communications from the company, keep an eye on their website. These are the ways that you find out what's going on with that application and are able to make it well known when it needs to be. Another thing I've seen work really well is kind of positive reinforcement versus the fear of being blamed. So what you want is your application owner to feel that sense of responsibility and getting credit for the work, right? So I'll talk a little later about an idea of promoting teams with a newsletter, communicating the actions of your team. But any opportunity there is when you're discussing an application to include the product owner's name and give them, communicate to the organization their ownership of that application goes a long way to making them care about it and not just see it as some tertiary task that gets little of their attention. Mike or Karen, anything to add on the topic of product owners as a methodology and things you've seen work and not work?
I sometimes see that there is a confusion between the latest version and the secure version, especially with the product owners, because sometimes they may not come with the background of either the security or in many cases for them the latest version is always a secure version. I think it is safe in many cases, but you're not always, that's not always correct. right? So there is still a bit of confusion. Should I really wait or see if it is a secure version before I make a a production deployment? So that is where I think like deployment rings having within your organization will be really helpful. You might want to take a couple of rings before you reach out to your entire enterprise, with the latest or the new version of the application.
Yeah, you really can't expect your product owner to be a security expert
Right.
of any kind, right? They're going to have to
No.
they have to go on what they get from the vendor, and the vendor isn't probably sending out a newsletter saying we have a vulnerability, right? It's just there's an update, and if you look at the release notes, bug fixes, security fixes is like a bullet at the end. Now, on the plus side, I think it's 99% of disclosed vulnerabilities have a patch. So I think that almost makes it fair to say that in virtually every case, the latest version is the secure one. And if it's insecure, there should be another version right on top of it. So, but you can't consider every update a priority and make a big stink about them all. So what I've seen and what makes sense is that the application owner or product owner will say, hey, there's an update and it has security fixes. And then that's the end of their responsibility. The security team will assess the criticality of that update and help prioritize it from there.
And in certain cases, there will be also confusion between a functional update and a security update. Certain updates could just be functional updates, may not have any security fixes, but some of the updates could be purely focused to fix certain security defects that were found in the product. So I see product owners sometimes struggle to really, understand what is the kind of update was released by the vendor. So that's where I think the security team or the packaging team really acts as a support team for the product owners to collectively take a decision and then decide, okay, this is the version that we really want to deploy.
The fact that there's a new version is a conversation that exposes that because another thing is, we can get really hung up on security and just have everything be security focused. And arguably, you're paying for maintenance on that software. You're entitled to new functionality, and that functionality could be very important to the organization's, ability to execute. So it's unfair to say if it's not a security update, it shouldn't be prioritized. And that's really where somebody that understands the application well can weigh in.
Yeah, it's either to fix a vulnerability, right, a security issue, or there's additional functionality that's relevant for the users of the solution that can make them more productive or enable a capability that wasn't available before. Yeah, I'm going to say it's, a lot of times I hear from application owners, to your point, Bob, is that there's just so many products and it can't fall on just one team or group or person to be responsible for it. So that's why they usually spread it out. But as you guys have pointed out, application owners can be very tied in to know exactly what's going on, and others, well, I use the product a lot, but I don't necessarily follow all the capabilities. So having, something like what Kieran mentioned, something like data that security operations can fall back on is always good to have too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one area that where we end up having this type of conversation a lot is through this next potential solution or contributor to the solution, and that's vulnerability intel and threat intel feeds. So vulnerability intel is there is a vulnerability associated with this this application or this version of the application that should be patched, and the potential is there for it to be medium, high, low, critical, often measured in a CBSS score, which is a kind of a 1 through 10. And that that's the potential, right? So a lot of organizations will focus on CVSS 7 and higher means that we're going to address it within N days. Threat intel is more around what is the likelihood of exploitation, what is being seen in the wild, where people are actually taking that vulnerability and doing something bad with it, and in which case you really want to prioritize that. Only about 8% of vulnerabilities that get disclosed actually get exploited. So, that, if effectively prioritized, you could really reduce your desire to patch everything, which is often just not feasible. And the reason that I end up talking about this a lot is our SVR product, Software Vulnerability Research. You basically create a watch list for a vendor or an application or even a version of an application. And if any vulnerabilities come out associated with it, you can automate an activity like open a ticket, send an email, send a text message. So what can work very well is to feed your product owner this information. So don't have them solely rely on vendor communications, but make them aware of any vulnerabilities disclosed that mention the application that they're an owner of. So you're enabling them to to be more aware of what the security impact is and raise a flag when something significant happens. Inventory matching can be a challenge in some cases. So if you just have your couple of thousand application titles and you want to match that against security data and stay on top of it that way, what I've seen is that's a thing that people really struggle to do because names are not very specific in a lot of cases, or they can vary. Even the way Microsoft refers to itself can change dramatically, in any given set of products. So that's problematic. And then knowing if you have a vulnerable version or not is often not something that you can glean from inventory because it doesn't provide that, build level, patch level version information that really gives you confidence that you do or don't have a vulnerable version. Another is the automatic product update capability. So this one may be a little more controversial as a potential solution, but the first thing we do as IT pros is turn off automatic updates before we deploy an application. And that's largely centered on the fact that the user doesn't have permission to update the application. So therefore, don't let it try and fail and end up with a support ticket. Rather, you manage that with your endpoint management solution and keep everybody at the same version and control the updates of the application. But there are more and more applications that install themselves in the user context, in the user profile. And so an automatic update of the application would succeed. There's other cases where people have admin access and they can install whatever they want on the machine. That makes inventory tracking and managing your portfolio really difficult. So why not go ahead and let that application update itself naturally as well. So it depends on the environment if this is a feasible thing, but I think the knee-jerk reaction that you want to turn that off may not always be the appropriate thing to do. Comments on this one, guys?
With this one, this is certainly provided as one of the many customization options by almost all the vendors that you could set outside of the installation, right? So maybe the best way to do is, like you said, there could be certain machines where you have admin access, the users might have admin access, and certain machines could be where the standard users don't have admin access, and some of them could be like really mission critical machines. So I think the IT pro or the packaging team can use that customization to their advantage, and then based on what machine collections they have, they could enable automatic updates on few machines and disable on few. So I try to reduce that load a little bit by, okay, these machines will take care of themselves. Let me worry about only these machines.
Yeah, I mean, there's a negative supportability impact, right? If you one of the reasons you want to keep everybody on the same version is you're supporting that one version. It could be that you've got customers on or users on old versions and users on new versions, and the functionality differs or the configuration options differ, and that could have a negative impact on supportability.
Yeah, it's all about trade-offs, right?
Right.
It depends on the susceptibility of the product. Like a browser, right? It's on the internet. It's connecting to pages, so it's a ripe target for exploit. So I've seen a lot of people that say, for their browsers, it doesn't. You can manage them. I know Firefox and Chrome can both be managed by an organization. It can apply updates without user input. So in something like that, a lot of them said, I trust the automatic updates because I'd rather, maybe face the occasional compatibility or configuration problem with a user, but it keeps us secure from that perspective. But other apps, like you said, if it requires admin to update, or it's not an application that's typically going out and connecting to the internet and doing a lot of things around it, maybe we want to keep that more in an in-house managed and controlled updating process, but still know when there's updates available, and if they're tied in with vulnerabilities, resolution, then let's go ahead and push those out.
Yeah, it could very well become a way to know that there's a new version, is that you look at your inventory and you see there's a new version in your environment because it's been automatically updated. Now you want to manage it on the systems that aren't automatically updating. Because the other thing with the automatic updates is it's usually like a user-facing recommendation, and they can say, no, I don't want to update, or ignore it, or turn off automatic updates. So, the same ability they have to keep it up to date also allows them to say, nah, I don't care, don't bother me. I'm going to end up with a really insecure, problematic version. All right, next topic. Too many packages, not enough resources. I got a nice picture of many packages. So can't keep up with package demands. One way you could address this is with a package catalog or a patch catalog. These catalogs provide the binary and the silent command line details, and usually the applicability criteria, so that you can basically not have to package it. You could use the same information to repackage it if you need another format, but these days most people are wrapping these vendor setups that can be installed silently and even customized silently in something like the PowerShell Deploy Toolkit. So it's more of a PowerShell command line install. So this can help, not solve the problem, but can certainly help. Only 10 to 35% coverage should be expected in a patch catalog. You're never going to find a patch catalog that covers all the applications that you care about. This is largely due to the fact that a patch catalog will only contain applications that are publicly available. So there's many applications that you, as a paying customer of that software, have access to the download for the each new version that comes out, and you have to log in to get to it. Such a setup isn't going to be in a patch catalog, or not in a traditional one. So the Admin Studio package feed module is basically a patch catalog of such information, and we include a couple of thousand applications where we have everything, but then a couple thousand more where we have incomplete data. So we might know the silent install command line and the applicability criteria, and that there's a new version you should be aware of, but we don't have the installer because it's gated and you have to provide it. So it's a way to to be more aware, and that's a differentiator for us. And it makes sense as Admin Studio, right? Because say we have the setup and the applicability criteria, and we know there's a new version. But there's no silent install command capability. So in that case, Admin Studio is obviously the place you'd want to convert it. So it makes sense for us to provide these kind of incomplete records to cover more applications and help beyond what a typical patch catalog could. Customization is another thing with a patch catalog. Often you can't customize very much, or it's limited to no, depending on the patch catalog provider. Again, Admin Studio does a little more here. We try to differentiate with vendor custom installation wizards for the Windows installer packages. We can basically set your properties and create a transform for you, and remember that when a new version comes out to do it again. But often you can't update. Now, if you are deploying the vendor setup, you may not need to customize it beyond the initial deployment, because most vendor setups will just install over the top of the old one and not undo everything. So you, if you decide where you want your shortcut and you set some default settings and that kind of thing, the update often doesn't step on those things, and so you don't have to use customization when updating an existing application. But that's not always the case. Some applications, you install the latest version and now it's not licensed anymore, or it reverts to a different edition than the one that you initially installed, and you have to test and identify and work around those kinds of problems on an application by application basis. Sure.
A common challenge I see with package catalogs, or sometimes also referred to as patch catalogs, is with respect to the coverage. So it's important we understand and have the right expectations. I think it's not right to expect that the patch catalogs or the package catalogs will cover 100% of your portfolio, because your portfolio could be a mix of, let's say, certain software which are available publicly and certain which are commercial, and you have got the licenses. So you need to really manage it in a way where you know what percentage of your portfolio you want to manage using the package catalogs. And that becomes really important, and that should be well assessed, is what I think when you look at the solution for the package catalogs.
Yeah, 100% simply isn't realistic. Now, you're going to want to get the best coverage you can, because what
Right.
you're essentially buying with the patch catalog is awareness of applications in your portfolio, and ideally, what you need to automate its deployment without having to do as much research or as much testing. So, you obviously want the most coverage, which we, for pretty much every patch catalog has a web page that'll show you all the applications that they have. We do the same for Admin Studio, but go a step further where you can actually import an inventory and then match that against our catalog so that you can see exactly what applications are covered in your portfolio a little more effectively than looking everything up one at a time. And another big one, I think, is package automation. The idea of automating packaging is a little hard to swallow when you first hear it, because you think, well, I'm going to automatically break all the machines in my environment. But it really comes down to automating to the right level. And in this case, I think that's to pilot systems. Or like Kieran mentioned, in a ring deployment, maybe it does go to the first ring, for so many days, and then you wait to pull the plug on it or let it move forward to the next ring and the next. But most applications you wouldn't automate to production. I think, like Mike was saying, Chrome updates all the time. You can have it automatically update. This is another one that I've seen people say, okay, we're going to let this one automatically go, just because it's frequently updated, and it so far hasn't caused my organization any trouble in an update. It's a safe update. And another application maybe more prone to error and maybe more critical because there is another application as an alternative to provide similar functionality and so forth. But the way that we've leveraged the automation in Admin Studio is to, you see there's a new version, it can automatically download that new version, it can automatically do the setup testing, it can wrap or repackage, and it can publish to your endpoint management system, and then even send you an email that says, hey, you've got 9 new applications awaiting for you, this week in Intune or Configuration Manager or wherever it's been published to. So again, it's not about 100% coverage. You're not going to subscribe to everything. That'd be insanity. But there are some that you'd want to, and you'd want to save a lot of time. We provide, in the software vulnerability management product, we do similar, where we have patches and we can automatically publish them. And in that solution, we provide filters so that you can choose to automatically publish only those things that have what you deem to be a significant security implication. So if it's just a functional update, don't update at all. Or if the CVSS score is under 5, don't update it. Or if its threat score is under 30, don't update it. So you can more dynamically filter based on security data. Admin Studio, doesn't have that security data, but it can effectively keep you up to date with everything. The problem being you don't want to try to update everything, because then you're going to have to test everything, and you're exposing yourself to that much more potential trouble of breaking things and so forth. So you want to scale the number of updates to a reasonable level based on the size of your team and the size of your portfolio and your risk. Anything to add there, Mike?
I think it's a balance, right? It's like everything else, is the trade-offs of having automation. Sounds great, but not every application makes itself available for that. So it's going after the big ones that change most often, the ones that have more vulnerabilities and the potential for exploit. Those are ones we want to cover. And also, I know some organizations, it's still like people that are remote. It's not always managed as well as those being in the office. So for those, since they're out a lot, if there's other ways like built-in updating, like we talked about, there's a trade-off, but it probably works a lot. But it gives you the better coverage. So, I guess it really comes down to why do we want to update this particular application, right? Does it fix a vulnerability, or does it provide new functionality, or doesn't necessarily have to be a vulnerability, just a bug, right? It's just it crashes every 5th time you launch it or whatever, and really understand, is it worthwhile to update it? There you go, prioritization. So really understand why do we want to update it, and then what's the best method and the cadence to get on it. Because I think once vendors usually kind of get on some cadence where they release twice a year, or they release every month, or so you can kind of understand, okay, we're going to probably get 5 releases a year for this application. Do we take every one of them? What's the upside downside? Talk with the application owners to understand, hey, is this something that can you get by without going to the latest version, right? Does it still work for you? And if there's no known vulnerabilities with it, then is it effectively able to be skipped? Or so?
Yeah, it's all about compromise. Once you accept the fact that you can't package and deploy every update, it really does come down to prioritization and coming up with some kind of filter that says what gets worked on. Vulnerability intel is good. Threat intel is better. Don't try to patch everything. Only patch those things that present the most risk, or in the case of functional updates, provide significant value.
I know there is no best answer for this, but I'm just trying to understand from you. What do you think is good enough percentage of automation of your portfolio, let's say I've got 10% of my portfolio automated, or let's say 20%, what you think is good enough, or let's say realistic, based on all the different criteria? Like, to automate a package, it has to meet certain criteria, right? You need to have the ready-made command line switches. You need to know what exact customizations you want to apply. You need to have the set of file. You need to have all the ingredients before you could say, okay, this one is ready for automation, right? Now, some of them may not meet those criteria. So considering all those factors, what do you think could be a good enough or a realistic percentage?
Yeah, one of those questions, right? There's no percentage I can provide. So
right, I started off saying there's no best answer.
I see what you're doing. You're driving a good point, and that is that it depends on your team, and it depends on your experience, right? If you guys, if you have a small team or a big team, but your updates always work, and you never run into trouble, then you're going to get more and more aggressive with what you can do. And on the flip side, if every couple of updates you roll out, there's a problem, maybe because of, your baseline or the way your environment security is set, or a couple of problematic applications that just wreak havoc on your ability to move quickly, you're going to adjust, right? So what we say, and, because SVM has that ability to filter what's being published based on security information, you can say just everything. Whenever there's an update, automatically publish it. We made that available, and then we recommend you don't use it. So if you set it to say, hey, only CVSS 8 or higher, or threat score 80 or higher, it's a 1 to 100 scale, only automatically publish those. And then you see, how do you deal with that, right? How does your team handle that load? Are they coming in too fast? Are they, or could you do more? And then you adjust, right? Like, okay, let's turn those thresholds down so we get more automation, and find the balance that works for you based on your experience with success of these packages, and the time it takes you to test, and and the size of your team. Even that can fluctuate, right? Maybe around the holidays you want to turn those levels up because you have a smaller team to deal with packaging, and then in times when your team is flush and you've got a lot of people, you turn that way down. So even when you found your number, I think it's worth constant reassessment as to what you can handle, what you can automate. Because obviously automation is great in that you can get in front of something. So imagine, new Log4j drops tomorrow, and your package is already in the automation pipeline. And so when you start getting hammered, what about this vulnerability that's in the news? You'd say, the update is already on its way, or it's already deployed to half the organization. Like that's the goal, right? Like to be in a place where a security event like that isn't a roller coaster where everybody goes crazy and has to scramble, but you have a process in place that is considering everything. Because a lot of times when there is a big vulnerability in the news and everybody's losing their minds over it, if you really look close at everything affecting you, it's likely not the most important thing. It's getting the most attention, and that makes it important. But from a criticality standpoint or a threat standpoint, rare is it for very long that the one in the news is also the one providing the most risk to your environment. So there's a lot to consider.
Right. So one of the major factor that you want to package automation is your experience with the package in the past, right? So yeah. I think, and since that is a variable, it cannot be a constant thing. So since that's a variable, maybe nailing down or arriving at a constant percentage would be very difficult, right? Yeah.
And even when you choose your levels, there'll be a 2-week period where there's 50 updates, and then a 2-week period where there's 4 updates. Like, it's going to be all over the place. There's going to be updates. There just is all the time. But some applications are far more noisy than others. Some are far more risky than others, from a security standpoint or even from an update standpoint. Because I know some places will really delay the release of updates because of a pain they suffered in the past when they updated it and it broke and people couldn't work. And now, there's a very rigorous process around making sure that that never happens again, and that's going to cost time and effort. And again, that becomes more of an application by application thing where, Google Chrome, you might say, we'll just roll it out there and it's going to be fine. And if it's not, they can use Edge or, there's a backup. And then some other mission critical application that is more complex and more critical to the success of your users. You don't want to rush that one. So this slide's a continuation. I just had to squeeze in another graphic because I liked it. So too many applications to manage. Another thing you can do is application rationalization. And I think this is a frustrating answer for people on packaging teams. Like, just rationalize your application. Once it's out there, it's really hard to pull it back. Your users fall in love with whatever. But do you need 5 PDF readers? Probably not. But once they're out there, pulling them back can be, political problem or just problematic for a lot of reasons. And I think it's a commonly experienced thing. So application rationalization is a great concept, but difficult to execute. And I think everybody understands the benefits, so not worth digging in much there. And then
I also see application rationalization is quite complex, and it might require certain tools for you to do a good rationalization. It could be not just about the version sprawl. It could be also about the same kind of, you might have multiple software doing the same thing. Let's say PDF editor, right? You could have Adobe or something else. So that could also be counted as application rationalization, where you want to have just one software which does the job. So it may require some of the tools where you're unsure if you have the investment or the budget, right? So that it comes with certain complexities. The application rationalization.
Functionality-wise, it'd be great to get those product owners in a room to battle it out. Like, why is yours best? Why is yours different? But this kind of segues into this next one, where maybe making a new application request is a pain, and people don't want to go through the trouble. So I've seen like an approval board process where if you want to introduce a 6th PDF reader, you're going to have to really make a strong case for it, or the answer is going to be no. And it can't just be, well, I used this one at my last organization and I like it. Like, that's not going to get approval, because you're adding a 6th PDF reader in this case, is expanding your security risk. It's expanding the amount of work to keep applications up to date and secure and everything else. So it should be nobody's focus to grow the portfolio unnecessarily. And so if it's easy to choose an existing application you're already managing, and it's going to take some time and effort to request a new one, that friction can be a good deterrent and help avoid a problem where you need to rationalize yet another application.
Yeah, or if you bring in a new one, you have to take an old one. If you have something that helps in the rationalization process too. So the new one may be better than the old apps. So make a case for it, and maybe we sunset the old one and do approve the new one. But yeah, we just don't let every app that people want to ask for just to come in. Evaluate it against the other applications in our portfolio and decide which ones do we maintain moving forward and which ones can we remove.
Yeah, there's probably an asset management group or somebody that's more responsible for that. But I think it's the packaging team's job to push back and say, hey, you know, this is adding unnecessary work, complexity to the environment, security footprint, everything else. And yeah, if there's a debate over which application to use, that can be triggered by the packaging team, but they're probably not not the ones running it, just making it known that there's a problem to be solved. Windows compatibility is another topic that comes up from time to time. Is my applications, are the packages that I've created compatible with the next version of Windows? And one solution is to just don't worry about it. It's a uncommon problem these days. Application compatibility in Windows has come a very long way, and so what we recommend these days is to, one, not worry about it, but then when there is a problem, reactively go back and identify and correct the issues. So Admin Studio is a perfect example of a situation where we can find a bunch of problems in a package. We can automate the solution to many of them and help you create a transform that fixes the problems and knocks down the number of risks with this application functioning on the version of Windows you're deploying to. But that takes time and effort. And if 99% of the time there's no problem, what we've basically done is pivoted to say, let those tests run, and then you have them. If in functional testing you encounter a problem, then you can go back and take advantage of these automatic fixes and information in the reports to identify and correct the issue. But because it happens so infrequently, it's not worth doing up front. And this is something I see widely adopted.
Microsoft has gone way ahead and also said that Windows 10 is the most compatible operating system they have till today. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree with not to worry about it and be reactive, so you could save some time and you could use it for other critical activities. I understand this was a problem some time ago, especially when the migration between XP and Windows 7, because I think there was a shift in the way the operating systems behaved between XP and Windows 7. But over the time, I think Microsoft has come a long way, and they've fixed or they have done a very good job in handling these compatibilities, especially with using the shims and all that.
Yeah, I've heard them take a very strong position on application compatibility and almost challenging their customer base to bring us an application that's not compatible, and they know what to do and how to address it. It's just not so common. And application conflicts is a very similar one. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to go through this one a little quicker. But the problem of DLL or applications stepping on each other is, again, something that doesn't happen that much these days, and therefore it can be handled reactively. Not very common today. If you do have an application that has this problem, it's probably a very old application. Maybe you can find an alternative or an update. You can, of course, bundle applications like this in a virtual application package like AppV or MSIX. In these scenarios, the applications can't step on each other because they're in these virtual bubbles where conflicts are a non-issue. Again, don't worry about it. And if you should run into a problem, you can address that reactively, just as we said with the Windows compatibility. A lack of silent install support is another thing that comes up. You get an application, you can't figure out how the heck to silently install this thing, so you can use the PowerShell AppDeploy toolkit like you want to. These days, one solution is to look harder. Pretty much every enterprise application on the market today has some level of support. Some are not well documented. In some cases, there's an inherent silent install capability just based on the technology used by the vendor. If they used InnoSetup or Install Shield or whatever technology they use, there's often silent switches that automatically work that the vendor could potentially not even be aware of, but that you can take advantage of. You can, of course, repackage it to an MSI. This is a really obvious one, but if you don't have silent install support or it's complicated to configure, or you can't figure out how to script it effectively, repackage it, and then you can wrap that repackaged MSI in the PowerShell Deploy Toolkit as well and get the same benefits. The only real problem with repackaging the MSI is when there's an update, you'll need to repackage it again and rip and replace the old one versus doing an update.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a question about, we were talking earlier about updates and what about applications that are repackaged, and you're in essence throwing away the old installer. So when they come out with new versions, as you said, Bob, that is a trade-off. So that's why when I talk to a lot of customers, they really like to work with the vendor install as much as possible. But to your point, if it's an EXE that just does not support it, does not run silently, there's no way to force it, then you fall back to repackaging. And so that is an extra step you have to keep in mind.
And it's a benefit of MSIX too, right? So if it's an MSI, you have to rip and replace the old one. Mm-hmm. If it's an MSIX, they identify themselves by name and version in the manifest. And so a new version can update an old one properly versus having to do a rip and replace. So it's a smoother upgrade process. I think there's a lot of benefits to application updates with MSIX that a lot of us just haven't realized yet because it's still early days in terms of adoption. And then, we were talking about application rationalization and such before. Find another product. If there's no silent install capability, or maybe your product owners are fighting over which application to use and they're both very similar, weigh in and say, hey, this one that's easier to deploy, is going to cost us less in the long run and be more secure in the long run. And that should be a factor in deciding something like that.
Yeah, that's the long-term approach, is push back on the vendor to ask them, because sometimes the installer, unfortunately, it's the first thing that you experience, but it's the last thing a lot of times vendors spend time on. So being able to have an installer that's worthy to deploy through an enterprise. But, in the short term, that's why you've got solutions like Admin Studio to help you get over that challenge shortly before. But yeah, long term, you really want to, MSI would be great, or at least an EXE that can be run silently.
Yeah. I skipped one because we're running out of time, and I like this one. This was well received at the event. This idea of ensuring a positive team reputation. Once you deploy a bad update and everyone finds out you're updating their computers overnight or over the weekend, then every computer problem they have, from slow logon to the printer doesn't work, is potentially your fault for something that your team did to their machine that they don't understand. So a really good way to mitigate this is to communicate and celebrate success. So let your users know that you're updating their applications, and because they almost always work. You do your job, you do your testing, and you're mostly very successful. So don't let your users only learn of your activities when there's a problem. Make sure that they know all the work that's being done. This is also a great opportunity to highlight the product owner. And it is also a great opportunity to highlight the team participating in pilot testing. So I've talked to a couple of customers and at the event a couple of more that use this concept of a newsletter. They do a weekly newsletter, and it says, these are the applications we're rolling out. This is why. These are the product owners. And these are the pilot testers for this application. So people are getting visibility and credit for the work that they do in testing the application, in identifying the need for an update to the application. And that's great. Like sharing the success, share the wealth, and it's a double-edged sword. If something does go wrong, It's not all on you. The application owner requested it. The pilot testers blessed it and said that it was good to go. Team success, and the team also shares in potential failures and when things do eventually happen to go wrong, hopefully not too severely. So this was a really cool way to I think shine a light on a team that often would otherwise go unnoticed. And very related to that, I mentioned the pilot program visibility and promoting the product owner. So it's a good place to get all of this done in one shot. And that kind of speaks to it. So with just a couple of minutes left, while we scan for questions, I wanted to, of course, promote our community again. We've got a lot of activity there. We're always updating and posting, not just product stuff, but industry stuff as well. And one thing that we do every time it's time for one of these roundtables, it's another AI image, by the way, roundtable, is coming up with a good topic. So it's not easy to do. There's things that you want to hear about. We need to hear what you want to hear about. This will ensure that we're talking about something you care about, that we don't, run the well dry on ideas of things to talk about and stop doing these. I think we all enjoy them and have gotten some great feedback. So please come to the Admin Studio discussion forum and share any ideas you have on topics you'd like to hear us discuss in the future. This URL is pretty much impossible, but if you just go to the community on flexera.com and pick Admin Studio, you'll see the forum, and it should be right on top. Our next one will be in January. Hope to see you there. If you didn't sign up and check the box to be notified of future events, I encourage you to do so, or watch for that specific date when it drops so that you can sign up. 2 minutes for a question. What's the best one?
I've got one here. Mike,
Okay.
go ahead. All right, so
Yeah, go ahead.
while automatic updates are great in principle, were left in the hands of the vendors testing or lack of. And only 2 weeks ago, we experienced an auto update of Adobe failed to install, which took them 2 weeks to fix it. Fortunately, it didn't stop the application from working, but did generate many incidences unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that. Another
Okay.
one came in.
Well,
Keep
so
on
we'll,
into that.
we'll hit that one up. I think, just to reiterate, the poster Gareth said, updates are great, but sometimes there's challenges with those, right? But pushing those out. So I'd go back to what Bob was talking on this last slide is it's a balance, and it's definitely, if you want to have automatic updates, have them under your management. So at the very least, you can go to those pilot groups. So you may want to turn on automatic updates for a certain subset. And, if everything's good, passes within the next week, right, then you can release the update to all the rest of the folks through your deployment system. So that way you have that kind of a check. Because, I'll say vendors test against, base Windows and maybe some of their other products. They don't necessarily test against other solutions. So not to say that this was a, application conflict or something like that, but sometimes those little things, they assumed you were on the latest library, of whatever, the .NET framework, and you happen not to be. So vendors absolutely should be testing their apps, but I wouldn't necessarily rely solely on them to make sure that it works well in your environment, right? You're the expert in your environment. So
I remember it was best practice not so long ago to not deploy the latest service pack for Windows because there was a couple of service packs with breaking fixes in them. People either wanted to be a service pack behind or at least a couple of months behind in order for others to go through the pain of identifying what might be broken. But if you're taking security into account, that may not be a wise choice to intentionally be behind. We are out of time. We do have more questions. I think we'll take these to the forum and invite you, as always, to take your questions to the discussion forum. But please look for answers to any unanswered questions there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.